talking tonight about crashes, giving you a bit of history of crashes, why crashes have reduced over the decades in the 20th century and then to the 21st century where they're more or less acceptable. And really, most people only have a crash once every 14 years per vehicle. So it's a lot safer to drive than it was years ago. Yes, there's more vehicles, but it's still safer to drive today than it was in the late 1960s, early 1970s, when one for the road was really about drinking and driving. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Stick around. We'll be right back with that information. Hi there, Smart Drivers. Rick with Smart Drive Test, talking to you tonight about crashes. A few people here. Carrie's here from Minnesota. If you're tuning in, let us know where you're tuning in from in the world, and let us know what class of license you're working towards. We can help you with both car license and CDL. CDL stands for Commercial Driver's License for those in the States working towards a truck or bus license. Bandit's here. Jacob's here. Ryan is taking a test in Kelowna tomorrow. Good luck with that. She should be really awesome. Corey's here, Bricks for Wheels. Corey is the moderator and keeps all the bad people out. Once you get to a certain size on YouTube, people like to spam you and say all kinds of nasty things. Ivan is here. Greetings from Sumter, South Carolina. Excellent. And my friend Sam is here. Sam is a driving instructor in New York City, and I'm meeting up with Sam in May. I'm very excited about that. And we're going to do a mock road test in New York City and give you some information. Oh, actually, he's in the Bronx here. And we're going to give you some road test tips for taking road tests in bigger cities. So Joseph is here. My deal, try to drive defensive driving. Excellent. So we're going to help you with all of that. As well, just to let you know, the Pass Your Road Test first time is available over at the Smart Drive Test website. $37.95. And as well, when you pick up Pass Your Road Test first time to help you be a smarter, safer driver on the road, we're also throwing in the winter driving and the defensive driving smart courses. So we're going to give you those two courses as well and help you out. And just to let you know that if you're on my email list over at the Smart Drive Test website, anything that I send you, anything that I recommend to you, courses that I have on sale and those types of things, I only recommend those to you. I only try and sell those to you if I absolutely believe that they are going to help you out. So know that I have created those courses, done the best that I can to give you the best information possible to help you to be safer on the roadway. So those are available over there. Prince Edward Island, Canada is where this lad's from. Bandit in Prince Edward Island. Yes, Charlottetown Accords. That's where Canada started in 1867. Just a little bit of history there. Vlogs, Gordon. No pressure from the New York City road test. Vlogs, watching from New York. Just got my permit last year, but my mom never taught me how to drive because her car broke. That's unfortunate. Well, Sam is in the Bronx, if that works out for you. Katie working towards her license there, getting her learner's permit. Excellent. So lots of people here tonight. And if I don't get to your question, it's not because I didn't see it. It's just because it's busy here on the stream with lots of questions, lots of comments. So just ask it again or send me an email, rick@smartdrivetest.com, and I'll be sure to answer your question for you. Maxie is here. Thank you so much for the compliment. Sign Cutter. Good evening, Rick from North Dakota. Completed my Class B with school bus and passenger endorsement on Friday. That is absolutely brilliant. Congratulations, Sign Cutter, on getting your school bus license there. Brilliant. I'm already training on the semi, so I hope to test out for Class A in a week or two. Absolutely brilliant. And Sign Cutter, are you working on a manual transmission? How's that working out for you? Excellent. So without further ado, we're going to get over to the presentation. I'll get through the presentation for you, and then we'll come back, and the remainder of the time here we'll spend answering questions on how to pass a road test, any questions you have about defensive driving, maybe even winter driving, because I know here where I live in the interior of British Columbia, we're still getting a bit of winter in the mornings. We're waking up to snow on the ground. So if you have any questions about that, you have any questions about driving in other parts of the world, you're traveling and you're from a country where you drive on the left side of the road, you're traveling to a country that drives on the right side of the road, I can give you a hand with that as well. And the only thing I probably, so that's what we're doing. Okay. Okay, let's see. There was something here that I was going to say. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so sign cutter, you're working on a 10-speed manual. Excellent. That's going to work out well for you. Joseph is in Arkansas. Awesome. So let's get over to the presentation. So we're talking tonight about car crashes. We're going to talk about the different kinds of car crashes. I'm going to give you a bit more information about why you should consider a defensive driving course, particularly the defensive driving course we have the Smart Drive Test website available for you to help you to be safer. And we've all seen the crash test dummies, the testing of cars. This is a big thing in the United States and Europe and other places in the world where they crash test cars for safety. And one of the interesting points about crash tests on cars is that this didn't come about until the 1970s. So we've only had crash tests on cars for about 40 years. And when this push came in the 1960s, the response from the auto manufacturers was that safety will never sell. And they couldn't have been more wrong, because one auto manufacturer, Volvo, for example, has built its entire car manufacturing and its marketing platform on the basis of occupant safety. And that's what it is. And all of the other cars have come online now. And if they rate low in those tests, then they're not going to do well in terms of selling their vehicles, because people want to keep themselves and their families safe in their vehicle. So if you're new to Smart Drive Test, my name is Rick August. I do have a PhD in legal history, study of policing, courts, and prisons. As you may or may not know, my expertise is in policing as it relates to traffic, oddly enough. Throughout the 1990s, I drove truck long haul up and down the eastern seaboard of the United States, hauling freight out of Canada into the United States. Drove 75-foot rigs in and out of Manhattan, into Philadelphia, Florida, all those places. So did that. Went to university in the early 2000s in Australia, went to the University of Melbourne, and drove coaches while I was there, and became a licensed driving instructor in 1997. And most of my work is around commercial driving, so teaching people how to drive trucks and buses. I've done a lot of car, though. Was a driver rehabilitation specialist for a period of time while I was doing my undergraduate, and helped people to return to driving who had some sort of disability, lost a limb, or had had a stroke or whatnot, and were returning to driving, and also taught people how to drive with hand controls. So this is an article that I wrote while I was working at the university and doing my undergraduate. It was an academic paper called "Spinning Our Wheels," which is basically the ineffectual nature of traffic policy, that education and attempts like distracted driving, the campaigns that we currently have in place for distracted driving, these are not changing the way that people drive. And here's a good example of that. In terms of changing the way that people drive. I think it was 2011, the AAA in the United States, the Automobile Association of America, did a study and asked people in the United States, drivers in the United States, if they had used their cell phone, not their hands-free phone, but they're holding their phone, if they had used their phone while driving. 66% of Americans said that they had held their phone while they were driving. Now, you have to understand, this is in a time before the widespread laws came in that outlawed people using handheld cell phones while driving. So that's not really surprising. But what was surprising in 2011, almost 10 years ago now, was that 33% of drivers admitted to texting and driving. And I could produce all kinds of studies from different organizations, traffic safety organizations, and those types of things, telling you that this problem has only gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better. People are texting and driving. People are talking on their cell phones where they're driving. So know that one of the reasons why we have a high number of collisions is because of distracted driving. There are other reasons why we have a large number of crashes, but distracted driving is really coming on board. And it's not just cell phone use, it's also telematics in the car. Think of the big screen, the navigation, and those types of things, and other things that distract us while we're in the car, changing our podcast and those types of things. So there's a lot of things in the car in and of itself that are distracting us while we drive. And this is basically what I argued in this article, in this academic article, and you can find this as a link down in the description there, about the inability of traffic policy to change the way that drivers drive, and they continue to have crashes, and they continue to, be distracted, be inebriated, driving tired, those types of things. So you can find that article, and if you're interested, you can have a look at it over at the Smart Drive Test website. So this is one of the cartoons that I found, and this was published in 1924, when the figure of war is handing the trophy for the number of deaths to the little figure of the motor car, and you could actually argue that there's some racism going on. There's some xenophobia in terms of the little car figure being, like the little Japanese guy. So interesting enough, in terms of traffic deaths, the number one causes of deaths at the beginning of the 19th century, or the beginning of the 20th century rather, was war, famine, and disease. And then at the beginning of the 21st century, the number one reasons for death among human beings is terminal illness, suicide, and traffic crashes. So traffic crashes have really, they're a lot more prevalent than people tend to think they are, in terms of killing people, injuring and maiming, and those types of things. And I'll tell you something else that I argued, that I said at the end of the article that I wrote, in terms of, spinning our wheels. One of the greatest secrets in traffic safety is that, yes, less people are dying in traffic crashes, but the same number of people as in the 1960s are still being injured and maimed in traffic crashes. And a lot of people don't know that, in terms of the number of traffic crashes and deaths. The other thing about traffic crashes is no one is immune. It's kind of like natural disaster. No one is immune from natural disaster. Princess Diana, James Dean, Tim Horton, Paul Walker, all of these people were killed in crashes. And Paul Walker is probably the most recent famous person that was killed in a traffic crash. And the ironic thing about Paul Walker is that he gained his superstardom from a franchise, The Fast and the Furious, which was about illegal street racing. And very unfortunate deaths in the world of these people who died. The highest number of traffic crashes, oddly enough, happen in the summertime, not in the wintertime, as many people might think. They happen on dry roads in clear weather. Drivers are sober, they're not inebriated, and there are a lot of single vehicle crashes that authorities cannot explain. For example, people drive off the road into the ditch. They drive into a tree. They drive into some other fixed object along the side of the road. People fall asleep in the middle of the afternoon, between 2 and 5 in the afternoon, on a clear day, sun shining, nice and warm in the vehicle. They didn't get enough sleep or whatnot, and they drove off the road and crashed into something else. We talk about distracted driving. There's very little information about prescription drugs and over-the-counter medications that also cause people to be fatigued and cause people to be inebriated while they're driving. I'll tell you, I'm on given some painkillers because I've got some problem with my back right now, and I take these painkillers, and it's a nerve pain that I've got, and it deadens the nerves, but it also deadens some of the receptors that put you to sleep. And I'll tell you, the whole day I am feeling incredibly groggy when I take this medication. And I'll tell you, I would not drive a car while I'm taking this medication. The same thing with Robaxacet. If any of you have back pain and you've taken Robaxacet, it just makes you loopy. But there are people who are out there who are taking these medications, taking these prescription drugs, and they should not be operating a motor vehicle. And this is much more dangerous than people who are drink driving, are much more prevalent than people who are drink driving, and it's much more prevalent than people who are taking illegal drugs and marijuana and those types of things. So think about that, the next time that you're taking prescription medication. So types of crashes, most common types of crashes: head-on crashes, T-bone crashes, rear-end crashes, and sideswipe crashes. Now, there was a time when head-on crashes, you were almost guaranteed to become a fatality in the event of a head-on crash. Vehicle safety technology has more or less eliminated the fact that you'll become a fatality in a head-on crash. There's crumple zones in the front of the vehicle, and there's a lot of distance between you and the front bumper. There's an engine between you and them. As well, it's designed to disintegrate upon impact and protect you and absorb that energy. Now, T-bone crashes, on the other hand, if you're involved in a T-bone crash at any speed, it's very likely that you will be killed. If you're not killed, the passenger in the vehicle will be killed, because there's little in the vehicle that is going to protect you. Rear-end crashes, if you're struck at any speed, you're going to sustain soft tissue damage in your neck, and it's going to be long-term pain that you're going to experience due to being rear-ended. And then sideswipe crashes. Sideswipe crashes are generally only fatal at higher speeds. And the reason that they tend to be fatal at higher speeds is because drivers lose control, drive off the road, drive into another road user, drive into another car, those types of things. So those are the 4 types of crashes that you're going to be dealing with. And we've already briefly talked about single vehicle crashes. Rural crashes tend to be twice as deadly as urban crashes. And the reason for this is because somebody has to find you. You're often traveling at higher speeds. You're in a remote area. However, there is technology in place now that is beginning to reduce some of the fatalities involved with rural crashes. We now have GPS, we now have helicopters, and we are more able to find you. But if you are in a single vehicle crash in a country area and somebody doesn't find you for a while, unfortunately, that could mean that you potentially could sustain greater injury than you normally would if somebody else was with you and those types of things. But before GPS, before helicopters and those types of things, these tended to be fatal types of crashes because it was difficult to get emergency services out to you. It's still difficult. It still takes time for them to get out to you. And I'll talk a little bit more about medical services and why we've been able to reduce the number of fatalities involved with crashes in rural areas. So the top 3 reasons for crashes: speeding, failing to yield, and following too close. And I would say that the second 2 are more prevalent than speeding, because there's a lot of definitions of speeding in terms of driving. Driving faster than the posted speed limit, driving faster than the traffic flow, driving faster than me. You're going down the road and some goofball passes you while they're going faster than you, even though you're doing the traffic flow. So, and then finally, the other definition of speeding is driving faster than the conditions of the roadway will allow. Okay, so failing to yield, somebody else decides that they're going to ride their bicycle down the wrong way on a street and they're in your lane. Are you going to give up the right of way and let them proceed, or are you going to drive into them and cause a crash? And then following too close. Following too close is just giving up your autonomy when you're driving. You're letting somebody else drive your vehicle, so that's another reason. Okay, late 1960s, just briefly, I'll talk about the 1960s in terms of what was going on in the late 1960s. You have to understand that the baby boomer generation, my parents, those born in sort of 1945 to 1965, were the first generation in history to grow up with the motor car. Okay, because before then, mostly the wealthy had motor cars. It wasn't everybody that had the motor cars. The baby boomers grew up with the motor cars. We romanticized the car. We didn't really have a lot of laws in place to prevent drinking and driving and those types of things. We certainly didn't have seatbelts, and we certainly didn't have safety features. And it was Ralph Nader who wrote the book Unsafe at Any Speed in 1963, I believe he published that book. Yes, we're talking about Ralph Nader, who was the U.S. presidential candidate 3 or 4 presidential races ago, I think. Anyway, he wrote the book, and he targeted a vehicle called the Chevrolet Corvair, and essentially what he was saying was that people at low speeds were being killed in these cars. And what was happening was that if the vehicle was hit on the front end, the steering column would be pushed through into the vehicle, into the cabin of the vehicle, catch the driver under the neck and break their neck. So we didn't have breakaway steering wheels. Other things, the vehicle would roll over, those types of things. So people were dying in car crashes. And as I said in the introduction, car companies, auto manufacturers were saying we'll never sell safety. So they weren't pushing safety. Actually, they were reluctant to bring about any changes at all. And actually, there's stories that General Motors followed Ralph Nader around. They sent people after him and those types of things because they were very upset with him publishing this book, Unsafe at Any Speed. Well, by the late 1960s, road fatalities were off the chart. Absolutely off the chart, and authorities were forced to do something. This is when we brought in mandatory seatbelt use. We brought in drink driving laws and those types of things, and as well we had the social revolution. We had social movements, grassroots movements in terms of anti-drink driving. MAD, for example, Mothers Against Drink Driving, and as well, I don't know whether I put it down in the description there, but I'll definitely put it down in the description in terms of signing the contract for life. But Mad was very instrumental in pushing for anti-drink driving and bringing in drink driving laws and those types of things. So all of these things began to reduce the number of crashes on our roads. And the other thing that I talk about in Spinning Our Wheels, by the early 1990s, after one generation of people had kind of passed, my parents, for example, I can remember their reluctance to wear seatbelts. Then my generation came along in the early 1990s and became adults, and we've been growing up our whole lives being strapped in cars. Then you begin to see high rates of seatbelt use in cars, almost, low 90s, mid 90s number of people wearing seatbelts when they're driving. So the other thing about young people in terms of, and I've talked about this before, in terms of drinking, driving, dating, and distracted driving, bureaucracy, drink driving laws are changing. This is why they're increasing police powers, because it's difficult to prosecute and convict drink drivers who've been pulled over. And again, the contract for life there, this is basically an agreement between you and your parents or other people that no matter where you are, they'll come and get you and pick you up. Vehicle safety features. As I said, Volvo has really marketed its vehicle as being one of the safest on the roadways. We now have crumple zones, safety glass, breakaway steering columns, safety restraints, and airbags. And all of these have reduced traffic fatalities on our roadways. And vehicles are much, much safer than they were 20, 30 years ago. Not to mention the way that they handle, stability control and those types of things, ABS brakes, all of these have contributed to reducing the number of crashes and the number of fatalities that we've had on our roadways. One of the other major advances that has reduced the number of crashes on our roadways is medical advances. Medical advances to keep people alive. The golden hour. We know we understand more about trauma, and this is one of the things that saved a lot of lives, soldiers' lives in the Vietnam War, was the use of helicopters, because you had an hour when somebody had sustained major injuries to get them into surgery and to suture up their wounds and then look after them. And many people survived wounds that normally before that they would never have survived. And all of this has been put into everyday medical science, and now we're able to save people that previously would have died. And so this is another reason that people are staying alive who have sustained car crashes. Now the question becomes, what is their quality of life? Are they living in a wheelchair? Are they living with breathing tubes and those types of things for the rest of their life? I mean, this is something that we can talk about more in the question and answer period. So think about that. If you got a road test coming up, good luck on that. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. All right, so we got a few other people here. Excellent. My friend Sadan is here. Conversation, thanks. We're discussing crashes, Sadan. Excellent. I'm so glad to see you here. Dash is here. LaQuoya was... there we go. And Jonathan, my friend Jonathan is here. Excellent. Hello, Jonathan. Aiden, when driving, absolutely fine. Why do I get the horn? Because probably you're doing the posted speed limit. If you're doing the posted speed limit, people are going to honk at you. Dan, do you have your license, or are you working towards getting your license? Let me know that. Okay. Where did it go? Where did my friend Tim go? Here he is. Okay. Sadly, in my experience, Crown is reluctant to prosecute impaired driving charges when the drug involved is prescribed by a doctor. Yes. And, it's interesting, Tim, that you talk about that, but people are completely inebriated on prescription medication, and this might be similar to the fact that they've changed the manslaughter charge, that we no longer have manslaughter, because they showed throughout history, before, when we were using the charge of manslaughter, that the juries were reluctant to convict people charged with that under the criminal code if they were charged with manslaughter. So now we call it negligent driving causing harm, and those types of things. So the question becomes, how do we control this? How do we make moves to begin to have some attention brought to this problem, because it is a problem. And exactly what you're saying there, that the Crown, the government, is reluctant to charge people who are inebriated on prescription medication, because there are tons of prescription medication, especially prescription medication that is a narcotic. I'm trying to think of one right now off the top of my head. I mean, these are incredibly debilitating medications, and people are operating motor cars with these things. And what's the difference between driving a motor car up and down a public highway, a 3,000 pound vehicle at speed, than carrying a gun or those types of things? I just I have a problem with it. It's something that needs to be addressed. Katie, I've been rear-ended, injured neck and back, shoulders have been sideswiped, injured my lower back. Yeah, so that's unfortunate, Katie. And that's what happens when you've been rear-ended. You're going to sustain soft tissue damage. You've been sideswiped. People are unfortunately duped by Hollywood and by movies, and they see people in movies have these just horrific car crashes, and they get out of the car. Well, sometimes they do. Yes, sometimes you do get out of the car and you're okay. But most of the time, you sustain tremendous trauma to your body and shock from being involved in a car crash. You don't just generally walk away from these things. You are going to get hurt. And I've talked about this before in other live streams, where there's 3 crashes, there's 3 collisions. There's the vehicle coming to a stop after it strikes a fixed object or another vehicle. And then there's you coming to a stop inside of the vehicle. Hopefully you're restrained. You're going to come to a stop against the seatbelt, because if you don't come to a stop against the seatbelt, you're going to come to a stop against the steering wheel, against the dash, against other occupants in the vehicle, because the crash test dummies, they've done studies and crashed vehicles where both vehicle occupants are unrestrained, and you see their heads just come together, especially in a vehicle rollover, and you sustain all kinds of injuries by not being restrained. So I cannot stress enough, wear your seatbelt. I know most of us do. There are some that don't, but we know that seatbelt use is only about 95%. So wear your seatbelt. And then finally, the last type of crash, and I think we talked about this last week, this is the reason that I'm doing the presentation on crashes this week, is your internal organs coming to a stop against the inside of your torso. And they're saying now that race car drivers are traveling at such high speeds. NASCAR drivers, stock car drivers are running 220 miles an hour on the back straightaway. That if they crash at that speed, that their brain simply collides with their skull and just goes to mush. A helmet's not going to save you in those events and those types of things. All right. Gordon, I was nearly involved in a side collision on a roundabout. The driver didn't give way, and I was able to angle my car just out of the time. We both reacted just in time. Yeah, and sometimes that's going to happen, Gordon. I'm glad that nothing happened. Hall phase, my friend. What crash would you want to be in if you had to pick one? I don't want to pick any hall phase. I don't want to be involved in a crash. I really don't. Mortz, how can you avoid your windshield to get foggy when driving during snowy days? Excellent question, Mortz. One of the ways that you can defrost your windshield and keep it defrosted, put the windshield, now it depends on how much moisture there is out in the air, right? How much precipitation is in the air. Because if there's a lot of precipitation outside, you can't turn your defrost on recycle because you're just pulling in moist air. However, turn it on recycle, put your air conditioning on, and crack one of your windows just a little bit, about that much. And that will maximize keeping the window defrosted inside the vehicle. Because if you got more than one person in the vehicle, you have to understand that we're all breathing out moisture, and that's going to cause the windows to fog up. So, know that. And as well, by turning the air conditioning on, that's going to draw the moisture out of the air. So do that as well, okay? Laquia, what was the title of the book you showed a few slides back? Oh, Laquia, the title of the book, it wasn't a book, it was an academic article that I wrote called Spinning Our Wheels. Look down in the description there, and you can find the link to that, and that is on my website over at the Smart Drive Test website, and you can have a look at that if you want, if you're interested in learning more about that. Maxie, which crash is the safest among the 4? Maxie, I would say that under 80 kilometers an hour, 50 miles an hour right now, probably the safest crash that you can be involved in is a head-on collision. right now. And the reason for a head-on collision and that being the safest right now is because of the design, the safety features in the vehicle. The safety features in the vehicle are that the front end is essentially a crumple zone now. So everything between the cabin inside the vehicle and the front bumper is essentially a crumple zone. So when you hit something, all of that disintegrates. So it's plastic, it's aluminum, it's designed to disintegrate and absorb the energy from the impact. As well, you're wearing seatbelts. Seatbelts are ideally designed to protect vehicle occupants in a front crash. Okay, they're not designed to protect you in the event of being rear-ended in a crash, but they're designed in a front end collision. As well, there's airbags, and the airbag technology has improved. Oddly enough, the first airbag was patented in 1953, so it took a long time before airbag technology actually made it onto vehicles. And even though the first one was patented in 1953, airbag technology didn't show up on cars until into the mid 1980s, and that was on high-end cars. The Cadillac and the Chrysler New Yorker, these were the vehicles that had airbags on them. And the problem with the early airbag technology is that you're going forward and the airbag was still coming out, so you still had more or less another collision with the airbag. Airbag technology has now improved to the point that when you're going forward, the airbag is already fully deflated, and the airbag is actually beginning to deflate as you're going forward. So it offers maximum protection now. So there's a lot of safety features in the vehicle in the event of a front end collision that you're probably going to survive that collision. And I'll tell you a story about this. I was in North Carolina in the 1990s when I was driving, and this logging truck, I don't know what he was doing, but it was 4-lane highway divided by a big ditch in the middle, and the logging truck was out and he had the trailer across the 2 lanes on the far side. Well, this pickup truck, it was a brand new pickup truck, so it was probably a 1997 pickup truck, come down the road. He was doing 60 miles an hour and he drove right into the side of the logging truck. He hit the trailer on the logging truck so hard that he broke the frame on the pickup truck. The pickup truck was essentially like this. The transmission fluid was flowing all over the road, and it essentially broke like this. And I was just driving out of the truck stop at the time when I saw him collide with the logging truck, and I thought, that guy's not in good condition. Like, that guy's probably dead, is what I was thinking in my head when I pulled out of the truck stop. The guy got out of the pickup truck. He actually survived the crash. He was wearing a seatbelt, the airbag deployed, and I mean, I know he was hurting the next couple of days, but he actually survived the crash. So vehicle technology, vehicle safety features have improved a lot, and they will protect you in the event of a collision. The one that we still have not mastered yet, and it's sheer physics, you cannot overcome physics, is T-bone crashes. Is when the car is driving this way and another car drives into the side of it. That's called a T-bone crash. And the reason that we're not able to develop safety features that will protect vehicle occupants is because there's nothing there. There's 2 skins. There's a piece of plastic on the inside of the door, and there's a skin of aluminum on the outside of the door, and there's simply nothing there to protect vehicle occupants. We are putting airbags in, like side impact airbags, but side impact airbags just simply aren't going to do anything because there's simply too much energy. You're talking about a 3,000-pound vehicle at speed coming at you from the side, and it's very difficult to protect vehicle occupants in the event of that. Okay. Excellent. Jonathan, commercial driving schools, don't forget to do your homework to see if you can find programs to provide you free training in your state. Yes, always for CDL drivers, try and find where the money is. Do not just go and pay to go to a CDL school, always look for money. There's money somewhere. There's funding. Somebody's going to give you money, okay? Ask the driving school, get a list of funding to get yourself to CDL school. It's expensive. It takes a lot of time, and there is money out there. Look for that money, okay? Maxie, in a rear end collision and or T-bone, who is more likely to survive and or suffer lesser damage? The victim of that who causes it. So Maxie, in a T-bone crash, the one in the vehicle that's being T-boned, they're the one that's going to sustain most of the damage in the crash. And especially if you've got if this vehicle that's T-boning, if there's a passenger in this vehicle, that passenger is probably not going to survive that crash. So know that when you're making left-hand turns, that you are susceptible to T-bone crashes, and T-bone crashes are often going to be fatal to vehicle occupants. All right, Sam, the mechanic shop I go to is open on Sundays. I had a loud air horn installed in my car today. The old horn was way too weak. Now I can wake people when distracted. Is that legal, Sam? Because I know it's not legal when truck drivers take train horns and put them on their trucks. So I would be interested to see what kind of a response you get the next time you beep the horn at somebody. Okay? Okay. All right. Bandit, the only way to protect yourself from a T-bone crash is to fit your car with a full roll cage. Yeah, Canadian Bandit. I'm not sure that's a viable option for most people in terms of, taking their car, the interior of their car apart and putting a full roll cage into it. So, Maxi, rear end collision, who is more likely to survive, suffer lesser damage, the victim or that? Okay, so rear end collisions, yes, excellent. Let's talk about this for a minute, Maxi. There are things that you can do in terms of a rear end collision, all right? A lot of people think that there just isn't anything you're going to do. You're a victim and that's it. And that is not true. Excellent. It's not as loud as a train horn. Tim says, horn must be unreasonably loud or harsh in BC. So, herein lies the question, Tim, and I'd be interested to know if you have a response to this. Now, this thing about how loud the horn should be kind of goes to how tinted can your windows be, right? There should be a certain, I know there's some sort of measure for luminosity in terms of how much the window can be tinted, right? And we can measure that. And it's the same thing with what you just said in terms of the law in BC. Horn must not be unreasonably loud or harsh in BC. That doesn't mean anything. It does mean something. I mean, to you and I, it would, yes, that horn is too loud. But that would be very difficult to convict in a court of law because you would think that they would have a rating, a decibel rating, that if the horn exceeds, say, for example, 110 decibels, that the horn is too loud, right? When you have laws like that say horn must be not be unreasonably loud or harsh, that makes it incredibly hard for police to convict drivers who've decided to put some crazy horn in their car that's going to scare the living daylights out of other drivers and road users on the road. I know for myself, when I'm riding my bicycle on the road and somebody comes up behind me and honks the horn, there are some drivers who just love doing that. It just absolutely gets me out of my skin and drives me crazy. So that's, I just think that if they had a specific decibel, that it has to be within this range for the loudness of the horn. Then if it's over that, then we can measure that. We can just get a machine and measure how loud the horn is. Then it's like, here's a ticket. You don't even have to go to court because we have a machine. So there we go. Dash, I already can do cool stunt driving. I need to know how to become a pro. Dash, I think you might need to do a fair bit of work. What was the movie I was watching the other day? Just a couple of movies that you might want to watch in terms of stunt driving and how much stunt driving has, the level at which stunt driving is now performed at. Watch The Dukes of Hazzard. The movie The Dukes of Hazzard. The guy that drove the General Lee in the Dukes of Hazzard movie was one of the top stunt car drivers in the world. And then watch Tokyo Drift and watch Underground 6. These are some of the top stunt car drivers in the world. And watch Baby Driver. I mean, the guy that drove in Baby Driver, the Subaru car chase, the WRX. I mean, those are very high level stunt drivers. So that's where you're going to go if you're going to try and, become a stunt driver, okay? Gordon, I knew one guy who was arrested for his horn sounding too low. It was actually just a decimal below standard. That's odd, Gordon. I don't think I can't say I ever know a driver that's been ticketed for having a horn that was too low. Tim, you were right. The officer has to convince the court that it was unreasonable. It's then up to the court, and that can be a problem. Yeah, and it seems to me, Tim. I mean, this is one of the problems that we have in the entire system of policing and courts and convictions and traffic laws and those types of things. I mean, it seems to me that this takes up an incredible amount of resources to try and convict for things that would seem to be fairly straightforward. That maybe when the law was created, maybe the law was created in the 1960s, who knows, or earlier than that. But in this day and age, with ease of measuring devices for sound, it might be fairly easy to change the law, and then we're not investing all of this time and energy and resources into making our roads safer, making horns that they're not stupid loud. Anyway, I digress. Hall phase. I remember some 30 years ago, cars used to be all blocky. Why were cars made like that? It's Hall phase. One of the things you have to understand, automotive engineering. I mean, the reason they were boxy is because all of this metal is made on a press, and I mean, we didn't have computers at the time, so everything was, it was a prototype put into a press. It was designed for assembly lines and those types of things. I mean, now we have computers. I mean, we can do things with computers and designs of cars and those types of things that we couldn't possibly have done 30 or 40 years ago. And in terms of design, I mean, as well, we have so much more information about vehicles, automotive safety and those types of things in terms of making vehicles safer, making vehicles more aerodynamic, the number of features that we have on vehicles in terms of ABS brakes, stability control, power steering, all of those types of things. So this is one of the reasons why automotive technology has changed so dramatically in the last 20, 30 years is because of computers. Okay, Jonathan, do you have any questions about the CDL you're interested in getting? Okay, Bandit, Hall phase cars were made like that because it was cheaper and supposedly safer and just the look at the time. Yeah, all of that's true, Bandit, but it has a lot to do with computers and automotive technology, automotive evolution as well, right? And the other thing is that here's the other one that I just thought about in terms of the design of automobiles. The fact that we had most of the automobiles at the end of the 1960s, early 1970s with the muscle cars was V8 engines, right? I mean, think of it. Gasoline was cheap. I mean, in the late 1960s, gasoline was probably 25 or 30 cents a gallon. Just let that sink in for a second. 25 or 30 cents a gallon. So, I mean, fuel mileage was not a concern at all. It wasn't until the OPEC oil crisis in the early 1970s that we began to even consider fuel economy on vehicles. And when we had, after the OPEC oil crisis, and we had fuel economy as a consideration of buying vehicles, this is when car manufacturers, Nissan, Datsun, Honda, Toyota, these are when these car manufacturers actually took off, because they'd been building all of these cars, but nobody wanted them. But then when fuel economy became a consideration, that's when these cars came into the fore and people started buying them. I mean, think of the Hyundai Pony, for example. People who had that as a first car. I mean, that was a pretty crappy car. So, Tim, it's very difficult to change our driving laws. BC is overhauling the Motor Vehicle Act with regard to cycles, and that has been underway for about 2 years. Progress report requests are ignored. Yeah, and that's unfortunate, Tim. Yeah, it's a huge job to change these laws, and in my experience of looking at traffic laws and looking at legal history in terms of trying to make things safer, it took an enormous amount of energy, time, resources to change the laws, to bring about reform. I look at the Motor Vehicle Act that, the one in Britain that was brought in. I think it was 1896. The first Motor Vehicle Act was brought in Britain. Australia followed suit. Canada soon followed suit after that in the early 20th century. I mean, it took almost a decade after motor cars made their first appearance on the roadways. Not only that, but enormous outrage on the part of the public in order to motivate politicians and the legal profession to bring about legislation that would control these vehicles on roadways. So, I can understand what they're trying to do in terms of doing all of that. Gordon, considering that we are talking about crashes, I am reminded of a movie, Duel. What do we do when another vehicle is chasing us? Well, Gordon, the only time that you're going to be chasing another vehicle is if another driver is experiencing road rage, or you're being chased by the police because you just robbed a bank. I mean, one or the other. So it's unlikely, Gordon, because in all my years of driving, and I'm sure there's a few other places, Sam and Tim and other people here who probably haven't been chased, but, I'm not saying that it won't happen. If you are being chased, just to take this as a question seriously for a moment, just pull over and stop. Don't unlock your doors. Don't engage with the person. Don't take photos of them. Most people, as I've said in the past, people who are angry with you can only stay angry for a couple of minutes, if not further provoked, right? So if somebody's like right in your face and they're screaming and yelling at you, they can only stay angry for a couple of minutes. And I know this from personal experience because I have had road rage incidents. Often my road rage incidents have been on my bicycle because drivers are inconsiderate of people on bicycles. And I'll give you an example. I had a guy, an Australian, was in Australia, and I was coming into an intersection, and it was kind of an off-angle intersection, and there was a tram in the middle of the road, and there was me, and the car went between me and the tram. And the car was close enough to me that I hit the side of his car when he went past. Probably shouldn't have hit his car, but I was just like, the audacity of this person to go between me and the tram when obviously they couldn't fit, and they were close enough that I could hit them on my bicycle. So he pulls over, stops. I knew he was coming, and so he comes back. He starts beaking off at me, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever. Yep, that's what happened. Yep, and I, didn't raise my voice, didn't do anything. But after 2 minutes, after he'd had his go at me and was yelling at me, he just walked off and got back in his car. And oftentimes, that's what's going to happen if somebody is experiencing road rage. They can't sustain it for very long if not provoked. So don't make eye contact. Don't unlock your doors. Don't roll down your windows. Don't take pictures of them. Don't provoke them, because oftentimes it's only going to be a couple of minutes and then they're going to go back to carrying on with their life. Okay? So know that. Sam, in my class, I asked my students, can someone tell me what distraction is in 2 words? Now, Sam, I would be interested in hearing the answers to that question. Hall phase, is it possible to survive a motorbike crash with all protective motorbike gear? Yes, it is, Hall phase. Very possible to survive a motorcycle crash. The problem with motorcycle crashes, not the problem with motorcycle crashes. However, the number one motorcycle crash is, you should know the answer to this. Everybody should know the answer to this. People turning left in front of an oncoming motorcycle. So, for example, the motorcycle is coming down the road. Somebody makes a left-hand turn in front of the motorcycle. That's the number one cause of motorcycle crashes, the number one reason for motorcycle fatalities. Now, going back to your question about wearing protective gear, wearing leather pants, wearing boots, motorcycle boots, wearing a helmet, wearing gloves, jacket. You've got all the protection on. If you go down in a skid, for example, another car cuts you off, you lay the bike down, and you skid down the road, and ideally, in a motorcycle crash, what you want to do, ideally I'm saying, this may not always be possible, but as you're skidding down the road, you want to get your feet on the seat of the motorcycle and push the motorcycle between you and whatever you're going to hit. Ideally, that's what you want to do. It's not always going to happen, but that's ideally what you want to do. And if you're wearing the protective gear, you have a much, much higher chance of surviving that crash than you would otherwise. And the other piece that I strongly encourage anybody who's going to ride a motorcycle, take a motorcycle course. Because There are many different ways that you can crash on a motorcycle. Lots of people think that if you go out of control on a motorcycle, so say for example you go around a corner and you're going too fast, the motorcycle will simply lay down and you'll skid across the road. There are other ways that motorcycles can crash. For example, you go around the corner, the back wheel locks up or whatnot, and then it kicks over and it actually throws you and propels you. So that's another way that you could crash on a motorcycle. You could go over the handlebars. You could lose control. So if anybody is thinking about a motorcycle, getting a motorcycle license, then that's definitely what you need to do. Yeah, and then as Sam pointed out, there's a lot of other factors. Depends on how fast you're going, depends on what you hit, depends on, what if you hit a car, you hit a rock, you go into a tree, or those types of things. So it depends on all of those types of things. Dash, never practiced parallel parking. It came naturally to me. Yes, and some people it does, and that's really great when that happens. It's interesting. Some people will do really well with parallel parking. It'll be really easy for them, but then they'll have trouble with 3-point turns, whereas other people are like, what are you talking about? 3-point turns really easy. We all have our strengths in terms of driving. It's important to know that if you're going to take a road test, that you are almost always guaranteed 3 maneuvers that you're going to do for a road test. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, at what test center. You're going to do parallel parking, you're going to do a 3-point turn, and you're going to do reverse stall parking, backing into a parking space. So know that for the purposes of a road test, at minimum. The other slow speed maneuvers, parking along a curb, 2-point reverse turn, backing up along a curb and those types of things, that's all up to the discretion of the examiner. So if the examiner decides on a whim that he or she wants you to do a 2-point reverse turn, then you got to do a 2-point reverse turn. Okay? Tim, gyroscopic procession. Push one way, go the other way. Motorcycles always scared me. Yes. Gyroscopic precession. I can't say that. Procession. There we go. Interesting. It's just a phenomenal little bit of driving information and what Tim is talking about. And it not only works on motorcycles, it also works on bicycles. That if you're going down the road, and they actually train this, they actually teach you this. If you were in a motorcycle course and you take a motorcycle course, you have to be able to do this before you can graduate. And essentially what you do is you ride in a straight line, and if you want the motorcycle to go this way, you push on that handlebar. So essentially you're turning the steering wheel, turning the handlebars on the motorcycle that way. So what happens is you're going in a straight line, you push the handlebar, the bike will lay down, and the bike will go in that direction. It's exactly what Tim is talking about there, and they make you do that in a motorcycle course. And I've done that on a bicycle going down a hill at speed, that the handlebar that you push on is the way that the bicycle is going to go. It's the same thing with a motorcycle. If you're going down on a straight line, if you push on this handlebar, the motorcycle will go that way. It's very weird. It's very weird. But it works, and it works really well. And you have to know how to do that in terms of getting your motorcycle license. Okay, so the answer to the question in 2 words: what is distraction? Divided attention. And that's exactly right, Sam, in terms of what you're talking about. And it's interesting, I'm reading a book right now called The One Thing, and there's a whole chapter on multitasking, and they say multitasking is a myth. It's a myth. We cannot do it. And I agree with that. We cannot multitask. And I'm one of those people. I come from an academic background. I could pour my head into a book for 6 or 7 hours and not come up. It's the same thing when I'm doing work on my business. I'm doing computer work. I can't listen to music. I cannot have the television on in the background or something else going on. I can do it when my kids are here because I can tune them out. But I can't listen to music and do the work that I need to do. So, divided attention, multitasking, and if people think that they're doing multitasking, they're not. They're simply doing a series of tasks in sequential order. And just because they think they're doing them fast, they're still not multitasking. So multitasking is a myth, and know that. And if you want to get more work done, stop multitasking, or at least thinking that you're multitasking, because you're not. Okay, Jonathan. Gordon, what sound indicates that your brakes need to be checked? How do you better... There's really... Gordon, yeah. Ouch. Okay, I'm missing something about a motorcycle crash here. All right, lots going on here. I missed some of the conversation. Okay, so Jonathan, now that you brought up the issue of protective gear on a motorcycle, I saw a video on YouTube of a biker with road rash, and when he was sprayed with alcohol on those rashes, he screamed like mad. Oh my God, Jonathan. Oh, I can't even imagine that. And for those of you who don't know what road rash is that when you're not wearing protective gear, say for example, you go out on your motorcycle wearing flip-flops and a pair of shorts, you go down. If the motorcycle goes down and you're screeching along the asphalt, all of that is taking skin off. Think of like, I don't know, like 5 grade sandpaper running across your torso at like 400 miles an hour. It's just really awful, awful road rash. I had a friend of mine when I was a kid and we had motorcycles. We were teenagers, not kids. And he went down on a motorcycle and wasn't wearing gear. And he had just awful road rash. It's the worst. Hall face, how do you prevent road rash? Wear leather pants, wear a jacket and gloves and boots and a helmet every time you get on your motorcycle, without exception. Never just say to yourself, oh, I'm just going down the road 3 blocks. No. You have a hard and fast rule. And I'll tell you something similar to that. My wife and I canoed, and we like to run rapids. And the first time we got into a rapid, I totally overestimated her ability to be able to run the canoe. Well, anyway, we ended up into a rock. The canoe overturned. We didn't have anything in the canoe tied in. We weren't wearing life jackets. And everything floated down the river. I mean, most of it we got back, but we did lose a couple of things. And we implemented a rule after that we always wore our life jackets when we were in the canoe, and we always had everything tied in the canoe when we were running rapids. Because, I mean, we were running some pretty significant rapids. But it's less dire in a canoe. I mean, you know, there is always the risk of drowning, but it's not as severe as it is on a motorcycle. And, you know, you go down on a motorcycle, you're going to lose a lot of skin if you're not wearing protective gear, if you're wearing flip-flops and shorts. And I've seen people do it. I would never personally ever get on a motorcycle if I wasn't wearing at least gloves, jacket, and a helmet, and jeans, and boots. Okay? I just wouldn't, ever. It's just not worth my skin. It takes a long, and some of it will never grow back. It's just terrible. Okay, Jonathan, wear full protective gear while riding a motorcycle. Recovering from it is not fun. No, it's not. All right, so we're getting near the end here. If you have any questions at all about passing a road test, you have any questions about defensive driving, those types of things. And again, the pass your road test first time, $38.97 over at the Smart Drive Test website. And when you buy that course, we'll give you the defensive driving and winter driving smart courses as well, because it's a great course. Guaranteed that you will pass your road test first time. It's a 6 to 8 week course, systematic, and as well, we want you to be smarter. We want you to be safer. We want to help you reduce significantly the risk of being involved in a crash, and those 2 other courses will help you do that. And if you're living in a climate like Georgia or some places like that where you think, oh, you know, it's not a big deal, I don't need winter driving because we don't get winter. Yes, but you do get cold weather. You do get ice and snow and those types of things. And the winter driving course will help you with driving in inclement weather. As well, all of the strategies and techniques employed in the winter driving course will help you to drive in fog, help you to drive in rain, and those types of other inclement weathers. So consider those courses, $37.95, and you get the defensive driving and winter driving course as well. It's right on the front page. Have a look there. See you later, Dash. Thanks so much. Thanks, Tim. Thank you for the links. I have them and pulled up. I'll study them and read them. Excellent. LaQuoya, if you have any questions, drop me a line. Carrie, awesome presentation on defensive driving. Thank you for your dedication to keeping us here safe. Excellent. And you're most welcome. Yes. Thank you, Sam. Gordon, motorcyclists will say, well, I'm just going down the block. It is my right. Well, it is their right, but they can also be dead right. Exactly, Gordon. That's exactly right. And you know the number of people that I have similar on that same tenor of motorcycles and people being involved in motorcycle crashes, people who've been convicted for drink driving, caught for drink driving. Well, I was just going to the store to get cigarettes. Got in their car, driving drunk, got caught on the way to the convenience store to get cigarettes. So it's the same idea, okay? So please don't do it. Don't drink and drive wear your protective gear when you're on your motorcycle, wear your seatbelt when you're driving. All of that will keep you safe in the event of a crash. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for the great conversation tonight. Another great live stream as always. If you have any questions at all or we didn't get to your question, drop me an email, rick@smartdrivetest.com, and we'll definitely answer your question. And as well, if you have any questions about passing your road test, drop us a note as well. Congratulations to all those people who passed in the last couple of weeks. And if you have a road test coming up in the next week or so, good luck on that. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great night. Bye now.